everyone. We're here at the Calabasas Library, and I'm Karen Foley with Authors Night. Today's guest is Karen Holly, who authors her book, initial K, initial D, and then Holly, and her book today is A Crowd of Stars. Thank you very much for coming, Karen, and as I told you before, I had the pleasure of reading your book twice. It really read very well, and of course I enjoyed all the characters. Kind of took me back in time to when I was in college, and the young woman doing wrong things, a lot of adventures. So it's a very enjoyable and well-written book. Now, you live in Los Angeles now?
Yes, that's right.
Where did you grow up?
I actually I was born in Boston, and then I went to school in Maine, and then went back to college in Boston. So I grew up in New England, basically.
What made you come over here?
Well, a man. I married a man who was taking a teaching job at Stanford University, Karen, but I'd always wanted to come to California.
Everybody likes to end up somewhere on the coast. New York, Los Angeles, San Francisco.
I think so. I'd wanted to come to California to college, but my parents nixed that. But I got here anyway.
So you married and came out here. Where did you go to college?
I went to Tufts University.
Very good.
Yeah.
But you also studied law. What was your major when you went to Tufts?
Philosophy.
Philosophy.
Someone told me it was good for law school, and I was thinking then of going to law school when I was still an undergraduate.
Did you go to law school?
I did, yes. I went to University of Santa Clara, and then I went to Stanford for a year, where I taught legal research and writing, which was interesting.
And let's see, you did something else with law. Well, yes, we were a teaching fellow.
Right.
And you taught legal research and writing. How do you teach legal research and writing for a law school?
Oh, well, that's an interesting question. And today, it's taught completely differently from how it was back then, because there's so many more internet and online resources. But it's basically, you give people writing assignments, and you have to teach them how to go into the library, find the books, where the cases are located, and then put it into a memo, sort of as if you were writing a memo to a partner in a law firm. Unfortunately, I was the first person to have to give them a grade in their law school career. And all of these people were first in their class from all over the place. And clearly they weren't all going to be first in their class again, so that was difficult.
How long did you do that?
Oh, it was just a one-year teaching fellowship program.
But what a great opportunity. And during that time, didn't you start writing very, very young?
I did. Actually, I published a short story when I was 10 years old.
Really?
It was in the local newspaper, and they paid me a whole $1, and I was so excited. I went, this is what I want to do. But somehow I got kind of off the rails and went to law school.
But you've been doing writing since you were in grade school then.
Yes.
And see, you also were involved somehow with the entertainment business because you wrote a lot of articles for the entertainment field. What was that?
Oh, I worked with an independent film magazine for a while, Movie Maker magazine. I was vice president for a while, and I did interviews with people like, Randall Wallace, who wrote Braveheart, and Harold Ramis. We did a comedy article. So it was fun. Not that lucrative, but fun.
Well, then you have a background in law and writing and entertainment. But what about poetry? I'm only mentioning it because in your book there were several references to Yeats.
Yes, I actually love poetry, and I'd write that just for fun, but I've never, written anything that I thought about publishing or anything.
Now, your name is Karen, yet you sign your books KD. Is that because of Keats, who signed his work WB?
Oh, actually, no, I never thought of that. As a matter of fact, I couldn't decide whether to use Karen or KD, and then I don't know why, I just like the sound of the initials. And I asked a friend of mine and I said, I don't know about using initials. And she said, well, it worked for J.K. Rowling. Why don't you try it?
So who was your muse? Who was your inspiration during your years as a writer?
Well, they've changed, of course. In college, I loved Hemingway. And then later on, I actually fell in love with Steinbeck. I tried to read him, or I was supposed to read him in high school and never really did it. Because I thought he was really boring when I was in high school. But now I think he's fantastic.
Well, sometimes you can be introduced to someone a little esoteric too early.
I think
And
that's what happens.
profound isn't really in someone's nature that young to understand and enjoy.
It wasn't in mine, apparently.
But you like him now. And this is your debut novel, from what I understand.
Yes,
Okay.
that's right.
What is your target audience? What age group? Because I thought it was going to be a young adult. Then I figured, well, I'm certainly not what you would call your young adult reader. And I was interested in it as an adult.
That's a very...
It kind of goes across a lot of age groups. What was your original target?
That's an interesting question, Karen, because I didn't really have a target. I guess I violated all the rules that you should be writing for this group, for that group. I just wrote what I felt and what I wanted to write, Karen. And then afterwards, a publicist told me it was definitely the young adult category. And then recently I was at a writer's seminar, and there was a young editor from one of the major publishing houses, and she said, oh, it's the new adult category. And I'd never even heard of that one, Karen.
The new adult?
New adult.
What is that?
Apparently.
It's just that you're not new to the world, you're just new to an age group?
Yeah, I think so. Because she described it as, it's a novel that's written in the first person, and the characters are between 18 and 22 years of age, and it follows this set formula. But what was interesting, Karen, is a lot of men have read this book and told me they loved it. Like one of them actually said, is that how women really think? I should have read this book a long time ago.
Well, then now they should know how sometimes bad men really act. And
That's
learn
a
a
good
lesson
point.
from there too. A new adult.
Yes,
I think
a
that's
category
great.
I hadn't even heard of.
Now, the years that this book takes place, it's generally, what, the 60s and 70s?
Yes, it's mostly the early 70s.
Yeah.
But there were a lot of things happening at that period of time, and so it seemed like an interesting backdrop for a story, that there was more to it than just the characters falling in love with each other.
Oh, there was a lot more to it. But the characters were great. Well, tell us generally the theme of the book
The theme
before we get into the characters.
Okay. I'd say the theme of the book is, young people looking for their place in the world, and a couple of them wanting something more than just finding a niche and living in the suburbs and having a nice house. It's like they wanted to do something that was maybe a contribution to the world. And at that time, there were so many things going on. There were anti-war demonstrations, and the women's liberation movement was getting going, and there had been a lot of racial tension. So there were a lot of things for people to look at and deal with when they were making their way in life during that period of time.
Well, they were new adults themselves.
Yes, that's right.
I remember in the 50s, the 20s and 30s and 40s, people married in their teens, even in the 50s out of high school. And in the 60s, then you went to college and got married right out of college, or went to college to get married.
Oh, that's hilarious. You should say that, because my dad always used to say to me and my friends, which annoyed us a lot, oh, you're all going to school to get your MRS degree, are you?
That's exactly what we were sent for.
Right. Exactly. And so what made these characters a little bit different is they were looking to do something more than just find a husband.
And those were the years to do it, in the 60s and 70s. Like you said, the racial conflicts, the world was changing. People were traveling more as single young people.
Much more, yes.
So now tell us about your characters. There were 3 main women
Right.
and a couple of kind of nefarious gentlemen. The kind that we all liked.
I guess it was the bad boy that went a little too far on the bad side.
But why not? Why not?
Oh, that is interesting, Karen, because I have had a few friends tell me, oh, I met the guy and he was so nice, but oh, I seem to be more attracted to the bad ones.
Well, why not?
I guess. Probably. For a while it seems more fun anyway.
Everybody should go through those stages. So I'm going to put a Pollyanna spin on it. So when you meet somebody nice,
You'll appreciate
you
him.
can appreciate them. But these characters that I mentioned, the women and the men, are they based upon you at all? Any of you really intertwined in some of their actions or thoughts or beliefs?
Yeah, they're not really so much based on me, although, of course, writers say that there's always part of them in their characters. But they're probably more based on a collection of people that I've known at various times.
So they are based upon real people.
Well, not really. It's probably a combination of characteristics from different people. So none of them was like one real person.
But I said the main character, Sari, who was that based on? I mean, she was so strong and a dominant personality that it seemed to me it had to be someone you knew.
Well, she's probably a little bit of me and combined with a friend of mine, a very good friend of mine.
Are you still friends with her?
Yeah, I haven't told her about the book.
Okay, well, let's go more into the experiences in these people's lives and how their experiences form the events in the book. So let's take a short break, come back to K.D. Holly and A Crowd of Stars.
Global warming is a problem.
Sound the alarm!
We think it's an important thing to save energy, to protect the environment, to protect the future.
Every who in Whoville makes a difference.
We need everyone!
Together, we can all make a difference.
Save energy with Energy Star, and then you can be
Part of the solution.
Yeah!
Go to EnergyStar.gov/kids to see what else you can do.
Welcome back, folks, to Author's Night and K.D. Karen Holly and A Crowd of Stars. We were discussing some of the insights of the cultures and political views that your characters faced. What gave you all these experiences and insights into these various cultures that come into play throughout the book?
Well, part of it was research, Karen, honestly, and then some of it was just people I've run into. Like, I have a friend who actually did leave college and run away to Morocco. Well, actually, no, I guess it was Tunisia. And she told me quite vividly about that experience. A combination of researching things and then running into people who've led slightly different lives. And I lived abroad for a year, and so...
What about the Irish?
Oh, well, that was completely fiction. I don't know anyone who's been with someone in the IRA, but I do have a lot of Irish friends.
It's very, very well done. Now, do you do all of your own research?
Yes, I do. not by choice, but there's nobody else to do it.
Well, I think maybe that's why it all seems so vividly real. Because you do it yourself, you're not taking it as hearsay from someone else necessarily. You're delving into it.
Oh, well, thank you. That makes it worthwhile.
Well, plus, didn't you teach research how to do
Yeah,
research?
I did.
What about the flashbacks? See, some of my favorite themes are, of course, the one in your book, love and betrayal. And there was quite a bit of that, as we as young women always go through. We really do. And it's a wonderful experience to have, because sometimes you are just going through life in a take it or leave it, kind of numb to how it impacts you. But if you've been betrayed, it opens you up as a person. Your heart breaks, but it's open. And you really learn about human nature and how you want to be known as a person. And I loved all these experiences that Sarah had. And I don't know if you had any of those experiences when you were younger, but they never leave you in a good frame of reference, because you learn so much from them.
Oh, I think that's definitely true, Karen. You know, it's kind of tests your character when you go through something that's really different or painful. And, you know, it's how you handle it. People go into it one way and usually come out slightly different, like with a different viewpoint or different emotions, and maybe a little more depth and possibly more understanding of other people and what other people go through.
That's very interesting, because when you say what other people go through, because I'm tired of hearing people say, well, I did the right thing, I treated this person just as I wanted to be treated, or I did this the way I would like to have it done. But that isn't it. It's doing things and feeling things and doing for others the way they would like it done. So the more you have opened yourself to other people, you know that maybe your way is not going to be their way. And you become a much richer person inside. And that's why I enjoyed reading it for the second time, because I saw more of this other than just an overview of the plot and the action that was taking place. Now, how come you picked a Beetle, my favorite car? They had everyone travel around, and when I lived in Europe, I had a Beetle. When I grew up here, I had Beetles, my favorite car.
I know, they're so adorable. I almost had to buy the newer version of it, but I got something more practical. But actually, after I graduated from college, I couldn't afford a car because, you know, the wages weren't very good. So my dad let me have his. He had a green Beetle. And so it was just really fun. So I was driving around Boston, you know, in that little car, and I loved it. And so it seemed like...
You could even put a ski rack on. You used to put skis on.
You could. You could. I saw a really old one on the freeway a week or so ago. It was all painted up, but it looked like it was from the 1970s. It was amazing. It was in great shape, but it was completely decorated.
And then they had vases.
Oh, right.
I had a vase that every day I would have a fresh flower in that vase in the Beetle.
Oh, that's really interesting. I should have put that in the book. Next time.
Next Beetle. How did you map out their adventures? Because they really did a lot of great things in a lot of fascinating places. Did you just sit down on the map and pick out the best places anybody could visit?
No, actually I didn't. Karen, it was interesting. You know, a few writers that I've read, they've written books on how to write, and a lot of them have said that at some point the characters almost start telling the story themselves. And that's what happened. I didn't actually have a blueprint for the whole thing. I didn't know how it was going to end. I didn't know exactly where they were going to go. I mean, I knew they'd be on the East Coast and the West Coast, but I actually hadn't plotted out they'd end up in London. I thought they might have ended up in Kenya, but and at the beginning, it seemed like that was where they were supposed to go, but things didn't always work out according to plan.
Well, I don't want to give away the ending, but it ended because you knew there was going to be more for each of them.
Oh, good.
And it almost deserves to have, well, it does deserve to have a sequel.
You know, a lot of people asked me if I was going to write a sequel and said they were waiting for it. So that was a good sign. So the ending is somewhat ambiguous, Karen, and I wasn't really thinking sequel, but I wasn't ruling it out either.
Because that's the way life is. There's no finale.
Right. Just the next thing.
Continue denouement for the next thing, for the next thing.
Right.
And it gave everyone opportunities to go to a next thing and the next time and the next person, another experience and another growth spurt of knowing what's going on in the world and the maturity. But I really wish you would write another one.
Well, thank
now,
you.
One of your characters began to strike up brief affairs on the road, which I thought was really interesting, after recovering from betrayal, which is a way one does sometimes cope.
Yes. I actually knew a person that was their response when they got over more or less grieving about the loss of the relationship. Then they just kind of went wild.
Well, in a sense, it's, well, I'm not advocating if any, young ladies are out there. And their mothers will say, I don't want to hear what Foley's saying on this. But sometimes being appreciated by another person helps repair your self-esteem and kind of validates that you are a valuable person.
I think that's a really good point. And for a lot of women, especially then, I think a lot of women back then didn't feel validated unless they got compliments from men or, knew they were attracted to men. That's something that's changed tremendously, dramatically, and is a really good thing.
Now, did you know where this was going as you wrote about her transformation? Or was this something that took a life of itself and you went with your gut feeling? Or was this something you had plotted for her?
Well, I actually had plotted that she was going to go a little wild, but I hadn't plotted specifically how or where or any of that, Karen. So that just sort of developed as they traveled along. Like when they got to the West, she developed
The ranch?
She developed a huge interest in cowboys.
Oh, yes, yes. And then only to find that he was married.
Right.
Probably married.
Yes.
But what made you write about the tensions and Africa, as an example, and the conflicts, like with the religion in Ireland, and this political strife in Morocco? Why did you want to bring that into the book? To open everyone else's eyes along with the eyes of the characters that saw these things for the first time?
Yes, I thought it was very interesting what was happening at that time politically, and how the people, the characters in the book, could become involved in those kind of causes, and because a lot of people go through their lives and aren't really too much involved. They just have a job, and which is great. But these characters were characters who were looking for something, more of a place in life, where they stood for something. And so I think that's why, Karen, because I wanted them to have something that they actually stood for.
Causes, things they could believe in and work for and fight for and develop.
Right. And, maybe that isn't the best way for a person actually to lead their life, but as my son said, it makes more interesting reading.
And more interesting living.
Yes, definitely.
What about today? What are you doing today?
Well, I'm a few days away from finishing my second novel to the point of it being ready to go to the editor. Karen, so that's been great and wonderful because this took me 5 years to write because I could only do it in very small periods of time. Because,
How long did it take you to write A Crowd of Stars?
Yeah, 5 years it
5
took
years
me.
too.
Yeah, because I basically only got to work on weekends on it because during the week I had my regular job. So it takes a long time that way. And so this one now has only taken a year and a half, so that's a good, you know.
What is the theme of that book?
It's about an attorney who's severely depressed and he's actually planning his suicide, but he keeps being interrupted by meddling friends and mishaps until one day he actually accidentally stumbles across the meaning of life.
Now, what is that based on? Anything personal?
Oh, parts of that are personal, yes. But still, it's a male character, and the events that occur are fictitious. But at one point, the character goes on a rant about what it's like being a lawyer. And, you know, I read some studies that say disproportionate amount of lawyers tend to be suicidal, at a much higher rate than other professions aside from doctors, dentists, and psychiatrists. And lawyers are apparently the top categories of professions for having suicidal tendencies. Anyway, I thought it was interesting because these studies also show that a lot of times lawyers feel alienated or isolated, and, you know, sometimes the work isn't that rewarding, which may be part of it. Anyway, so but the theme of it isn't just that. I mean, it's actually, I hope, humorous. It's kind of dark humor.
Well, for those who want to read it, I hope that you come back here and discuss it with us when you have it completed.
Oh, well, I would love to. Thank you.
And for those who want to read A Crowd of Stars, it will be in our library. Where else can you get the book?
You can get it on Amazon and on Barnes & Noble with either print copy or ebook.
Instead of me giving final words, like I always like to do, I want you to give the finale.
Oh.
And read the foreword that you've taken from Yeats,
Right.
which also says how the title of the book, A Crowd of Stars, came about.
Yes, this
But
is
first, I'll
where the
thank the
title's from.
Media Operations Department and the City of Calabasas and our audience, and most of all you, Karen Holly, for gracing our day today by being one of our authors.
Oh, well, thank you so much for inviting me, Karen. I really appreciate it. So I'll put these on. Okay. So this is from a poem called When You Are Old, and it's one stanza out of it. But one man loved the pilgrim soul in you, and loved the sorrows of your changing face, and bending low beside the glowing bars, murmured a little sadly how love fled, and paced upon the mountains overhead, and hid his face amid a crowd of stars.